Hello and welcome to Sojourner's Cove once again. Um, Back after a long hiatus, and precisely because once again a very pertinent and very relevant burning issue has come up before us. 7th August 2017, Sinéad O'Connor posted on social media that she is extremely suicidal and living all by herself. Well, that was a very brave thing to do because I know and totally understand how much gut it takes for somebody to stand up and publicly say that I am suicidal and please help me. But immediately after that, I've come to know that, and many of us have come to know and observed how eyebrows were raised and were kind of dismissed as attention seeking and stuff like that. And that immediately made many of us remember what happened on July 20th this year. Famous singer Chester Bennington hanged himself to death on 20th July 2017. Old news. Chester Bennington chronically suffered from depression and struggled with addiction, pain, and rage. Older news. Chester Bennington was very vocal and open about his mental health struggles and struggles with pain and rage and other issues that he was grappling with. Wait, now that's news. If Bennington was always so open and vocal about it, and there were telltale signs that such an accident could happen any moment, who was listening? Were we as a society listening or paying attention to? I was going through the Rolling Stones official website after this unfortunate event, and there I found his bandmate Ryan Shark write about how in one of his SMS interactions with Bennington, Shark says Bennington was describing his hour by hour struggle with addictions. When I now think of it, it's horrifying. Now I know that Shark was a close friend, we know, and he must have been listening. But ironically, in even the well-meaning sentence that Shark wrote, there lies a very common and yet a very sad phrase associated with mental health and suicide. When I think of it now, more often than not, when such an unfortunate incident happens, that is suicide, we all wake up with a jolt and then start saying, oh, when I think of it now, when I look back now, he was looking so depressed, she was behaving so weird. Now when I think of it, now when I look back. But that now most often comes too late before we could save a life. And that's the persistent problem with this issue of suicide and suicidal tendencies. I have no qualms about unabashedly accepting that because of my 17-year-long or even more severe struggle with mental health issues, I myself have and still often do struggle with suicidal tendencies. Of course, I haven't acted on it or haven't successfully acted on it, and I'm still around, and I am very pro-life. I don't believe in taking one's own life. But having said that, I know and I understand and I can totally relate to how horrifying an hour by hour struggle and survival can be, and how it can, in just one moment of desperation, snap a person. Robin Williams' wife wrote about him. He was struggling with brain disease and he was losing his mind, and then one day he too, like Bennington, hanged himself to death. And Susan Williams later writes that one day, as if the dam broke. And that's the thing with suicide. one day the dam breaks. But if we as a society and as individuals are attentive and caring enough to observe certain signs and symptoms which are probably leading to this fatal act, then lives could be saved. But as a society, are we even aware of these signs and symptoms? When I have had my certain urges, similar urges, because I, through therapy and other modalities, knew better, I have walked miles after miles to simply disarm and redirect that suicidal tendencies energy into walking. And even as I have walked miles after miles with that battle going on inside, I have many a times while walking looked around and observed people, passers by, and I've often wondered in my mind that all these people who are looking normal and passing by me were looking as normal as I was looking, but wonder how many of them were silently grappling with this one thought of ending their suffering, just as I was silently. It's not observable outwardly most often, and it's noticeable only when it is too late. But there are signs and symptoms, there are telltale signs. The question is, are we as a society aware and knowledgeable enough to carefully notice them and try prevent such mishaps? But I guess the bigger question is, do we even care? More often than not, when the question of suicide or suicidal talks or tendencies come up, we either, both socially and individually, most of us either totally trivialize it by calling it drama, attention seeking, oh nothing will happen, oh it's just a phase, leave that person alone, whatever. Or on the other end of it, we, because of various reasons, including the strangest phenomena of criminalizing an act like suicide, which is there in India and in many other countries, most people shy away, or most people don't want to get involved and get legally hassled, so we just leave people alone. I have had my friends, genuine well-meaning friends, come up to me later and say, I really wanted to reach out to you when you were struggling, but my family members stopped me, saying, you don't want to get into legal hassles, you don't want the police to knocking at your door. So these are burning and very, very relevant issues that needs to be addressed today. We wake up only when Robin Williams or Chester Bennington or Sinéad O'Connor and the so-called celebs go through such mishaps. But we know that in India, the official record is we lose 1 lakh people to suicide every year, and globally 1 person in every 4 seconds commits suicide. Do we care? Do we know, or are we bothered enough to watch the telltale symptoms? Now, if you ask me what are these symptoms, let's go back to Chester Bennington's case only. Again, I'll be quoting about his last few days from the Rolling Stone official website. A. Chester Bennington, before July 20th, suddenly went extremely cheerful, extremely creative, and very functional and active. Now, if a person you know is perennially low and blue, or chronically depressed and not very extroverted, not very active, and you suddenly see them going high on life, doing various activities, suddenly in a furor of energy and very cheerful, watch out. Something is going on and it's more than meets the eye. I have a favorite quote of my own which I kind of made up, and I often say, flames burn the brightest just before going out. So please watch out if a near and dear one who you know is chronically depressed, or usually of the nature of living a quiet or introverted and struggling with blues life, and suddenly you see them go extremely active and cheerful, please watch out and take heed and do what is necessary. Number 2, Chester Bennington set his house in order, set his family up for life, quote unquote, the website, before hanging himself. Now, this is another very telltale sign. Most people who are even wee bit responsible towards people and society and their loved ones, and when they are planning such an act, most often than not, metaphorically or literally, they put their house in order. And what are the signs or what are the symptoms of putting one's house in order? For starters, if you suddenly see someone calling up old friends or family members or acquaintances whom they have not been in touch for long, or even if they have been in touch and suddenly a call comes and they are asking for forgiveness, they are kind of trying to clean up the slate between people, please pay attention. The other sign is if they are drawing up inheritance papers, because that's also one way of leaving things neatly after they are gone. Suddenly, investments in life insurance or fixed deposits, because people who have families or children to look after and responsible for, and when they know in their mind that they will not be around, that's one of the telltale signs, that's one of the frequently observed act that comes up. They start sorting out their finances, cleaning up their financial messes if any, sorting out their assets and finances and all practical papers, so that after they are gone, their family or their loved ones don't have to suffer. Bennington bought a new huge flat just weeks before he committed suicide. So these sudden putting things into order are very telltale signs. Besides this metaphoric setting the house in order, there are also literally people can be setting their house in order. If you suddenly see your loved one giving away things that they know in their mind that they will no more need. For example, giving away your favorite items, giving away pets or plants or expensive gifts, because they in their mind are planning and knowing that they will no more need it and why waste it. These are telltale signs, so please watch out. I'll just take a peek at my note, and yes, so the other third sign or the other third important pointer, his another friend, Robert DeLeo, writes about Bennington after he passed away, that Bennington's messages were always very positive, always very looking into the future, living and growing old kind of things. Please take note that just because somebody is pro-life, you cannot safely write them off the red flag list. If you look into history, most people who have at one point of time decided to and succeeded in taking their lives and ending their suffering have been some of the most creative, most humane, sensitive, artistic and wonderful people. The paradox is, because they were sensitive and because they were struggling silently while giving out light to the world, somehow they kept drowning in darkness, and one day they just called it quits. So just because somebody is pro-life and just because somebody is constantly giving out messages of hope and constantly trying to build up people with all that they have inside them, doesn't mean that they are not a probable or potential candidate for crossing over with such an unfortunate event. So please, as a society, we need not write them off. Uh, there are always these signs and symptoms available. If we are aware, if we are really observant, if we are really attentive, and if we really care, these signs and symptoms are noticeable. Even if subtle, they are noticeable. The question is, do we want to notice? How ironic that not even a month has passed, and when another singer, Sinéad, cries out saying, "I am suicidal, I'm living all alone in a motel." Yes, of course, friends and families or some people rush to her assistance, but mostly eyebrows were raised, and it was again trivialized as a publicity hype or an attention-seeking act. And when that happens, I'm sorry to say, we as a society actually, and I don't mind sounding controversial here, when that happens, if that is our stance towards suicide and suicidal people with mental health struggles, then suicide is no more suicide, but it's more often than not negligent homicide. If only we are a little attentive, we can save many lives. And once again, saving a suicidal from committing suicide can never be the end all and be all. I can speak from my own experience and my own thought process that I often grapple with. Sorry, suicidals don't want to be saved. They are grappling with severe dysfunctional thoughts or mental health disorders, and they just want a change, a transformation in their life. And because that transformation, because that relief is not available according to what they perceive, with prolonged despair and prolonged struggle, they just find that one moment of desperation where they just want to end that struggle, end that suffering. So to prevent suicide, simply to prevent it and leave it at that, is no good. I mean, on a lighter note, that's a disservice to a person who's wanting to end it all and end their suffering, because you're just hindering their perceived way of finding relief and leaving them there. People who are struggling with mental health disorders and are on the verge of feeling suicidal and taking that step, suicide prevention is not the end all and be all. Beyond that, we as a society and individual need to become aware of their real deep inner struggle and provide them all the necessary social and professional support, care and help, so that the root of those dysfunctional despair and perceived lack of hope and lack of relief can be addressed, and they can be shifted, their mental thoughts or perception can be shifted to a more hopeful and healing trail of thought. So suicide prevention is not the end all and be all. Are we there to acknowledge the struggles that most mental health survivors are going through, and why are they being forced to get so desperate seeking relief, and why should this be the only way of relief, and why not the other more functional, more pro-life reliefs like professional care, medical support, social empathy be there for them before it is too late? Why only look at mishaps and say, oh, when I look at it now? Saying when I look at it now after the mishap has happened is no good. Bennington doesn't need our empathy and sympathy now. Robin Williams did not need our empathy and sympathy and our being there with him when he constantly kept saying, I'm losing my mind and I feel so lonely. Are we there for such people when it is still time? Or are we completely negligent and just ready to dismiss it with a raised eyebrow, calling it attention seeking and drama and insanity, and leave them alone and oh, nothing will happen? You never know when something happens, and you will know only when it is too late. And as I said, that is almost as serious as an unofficial negligent homicide. And having used that legal term, I'll end this video with another legal issue, a controversial issue: the suicide or act of suicide remaining criminalized in many countries, including mine, that is India. Yes, I will wholeheartedly support criminalization of suicide, or suicide remaining a criminal offense, but only on that day when we have first criminalized social or individual apathy, disinterest, stigma, rabid judgment, and indifference towards the serious issue of mental health disorders, and mental health survivors. Let's first criminalize our own stigma, our own indifference, and our own not taking these burning issues seriously. Let's criminalize our lack of awareness and empathy and being there for survivors first, and then let's talk about whether criminalization of suicide is right or wrong. I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of food for thought for both, all of us, for me, for each of you. Let's think, let's wake up when there is still time. I'll see you all soon, hopefully. Thank you for being here and listening. And please do subscribe to the video, to the channel. I will be posting relevant mental health issue videos on and off. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. And thank you once again.